Have you ever struggled with feeling like you're not normal compared to other people in your class or other people your same age? Have you ever struggled with anxiety, sadness, anger, frustration? If so, this conversation is for you. Growing up, our guest today, Luis, struggled with all of those things in middle school and high school. And it wasn't until later in life, until college, that he really started to connect the dots that these were all aspects of his mental health. And he started to connect with family members, with friends, and with mentors to piece together what was happening inside of him and make sense of it so that he could move forward. And he really needed the help of those people in his support system to figure out what was going on with this anxiety, anger, frustration, and even grief. Spoiler alert, he realized that coffee was a major factor in his anxiety. So if you haven't considered that factor, you might be interested to hear Luis and I talk about it. And he also shares some outlets that have been helpful for him in processing those emotions, and also even just when he's tired, the music that he goes to. When I mentioned grief, Luis's father actually passed away a few years ago, and he really vulnerably talks about what that's been like for him and his family members. We talk about how it's like everyone is trying to be strong for each other, but what strength means and what strength looks like can be different for each person. He also shares conversations that haven't happened yet in his family that he wishes could happen. And I think that's an interesting question for any of us to consider. What are some of the conversations in our lives that haven't happened yet that we wish could happen? If you're watching this and, like Louise, you have struggled with anxiety, please know that we have a solution for you. We have a signature online anxiety program where I teach you all of the tools, skills, and strategies that I've taught teens and college students in my 20 years as a psychologist. And it's designed to help you move forward with the next steps in your education and in your friendships. So the first step for accessing that is to click the link in the pinned comment below. It's like an introductory video, a free training for parents that you can also watch as a student, but share the link with your parents and they'll learn 3 keys for helping you move forward. They'll also learn more about the program to see whether it's a good fit for you. So check that out. And without further ado, here's the conversation with Luis. Luis, welcome to the YouTube channel.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I always start these conversations with my spiel, my ethical spiel, which is basically that although I've been a psychologist and I've been doing therapy with teens and college students for about 20 years, for anyone who's watching this, Luis is not my therapy client. This is not a therapy conversation. This is just a conversation between the two of us as humans for educational and research purposes only. So that's my little ethics stance, Luis. Do you like that?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for being with us. And can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Luis. I'm a 3rd year going on to my 4th year in astronautical engineering here at USC. I'm Latino, Hispanic. My family's from Pontitlan, Jalisco in Mexico. That's a little bit about me. I love rockets.
You love rockets. All right. Awesome. And Luis, thank you for the intro to yourself. And I know before we hit record, we were chatting about how all of us growing up in our families have different levels of what we experience in terms of mental health and how visible or how invisible the conversation around mental health can be. And for some of us, it's maybe more visible than others, and we might feel more or less of a space to share what we're going through when we're struggling. And why don't we start with, like, what was that like for you growing up?
Yeah, so growing up, I think mental health has different levels of presence. And so I remember, through like elementary and parts of middle school, I felt very blessed to have like a very complete family, where, the invisibility of like not being able to talk about like mental health didn't really affect me so much because I had all of my friends. I was happy. Um, and it affected, not only me and my brothers, but also like my mom, who was a very young mother at the time, especially when we had lost my grandma, her mother. And so that was a moment when we realized, or at least I realized, that mental health is something that probably needs to be embraced a little bit more and talked about a little bit more. Those are like moments of realization where like um, I was able to reflect and think about like, why would me and my older brother be fighting so much? It's just like, we're all stressed in those moments of like tenseness between family. Was when we had said, a bunch of things to hurt each other, but we also kind of came together to resolve things. And it wasn't very smooth. It was something that took a very long time for us to put ourselves back together. Money wise, our home and stuff like that. It was is almost growing up like in a Hispanic household. You have this like glue, this that's like your grandparents or some wise person that kind of holds the whole family together. And then if that's ripped apart at some point, I feel like you're thrown out of the bird's nest, and you're kind of you're dealt like a hand where you pretty much got to figure that out all by yourself. And at that time in middle school, transitioning into high school, um, there wasn't so much access or emphasis on the value of mental health. It wasn't until way after, like in college, where there was more of an emphasis through mentorship and stuff like that. And so throughout the high school years, I remember getting like episodes of like, well, I can now identify as like anxiety, and like sadness waves and stuff like that. And then just thinking like, wow, like, I'm not normal. Like I see everybody else, like they're happy. They're coming to school every single day. And they don't feel like sad, and they don't have these family issues. And so it isn't until very, very much later, like in college, where I'm able to talk openly, or you have built the confidence because people open up to me, like through friendship, that they talk about, mental health with their families. And so I started talking about it with my mom, and it's something that I realized that even she was scared to talk about. It wasn't that it's closed off or it's a taboo subject. It's just that there was a lack of visibility, in the family, and just how I was seeing my friends at school. My mom was seeing her kids at home happy, and she just didn't want to bring us down. But it's something that's kind of built the family a little bit more, and it's helped me build my relationship a little bit more with my mom and find some commonalities.
As you started to open up about it and bring up this conversation about mental health, it started to bring you closer and able to find commonalities in your family?
Yeah, 100%. Specifically with anxiety, because something that we didn't really realize is that my mother has like always had, she used to be like prescribed like medication for like depression or something, around those lines. And she always mentioned that they didn't really work. Like it wasn't like the sensations that she were feeling, like they were never satiated. And so it was also, she had realized it was like a lack of communication with her doctors, not really being able to like pinpoint what exactly those sensations were. And so it took us some time, thinking, both like us children and her, as well as like family friends, thinking, she's broken or something. But really, it's like the conversation of like, that she was able to have with me and my brothers, throughout the years of like, what exactly is it. And she was able to, talk about, how she gets jittery, how she gets like waves of dizziness. Is it some like underlying health condition or something like that? And growing into what would be about like 2 years ago, maybe like my first year of college, I started kind of feeling waves of like dizziness and like jittery, and like not really being able to like sleep at night. And me being able to talk about that with my mom, thinking, now are we both broken or something like that? um, and then also bringing this conversation to the space of somebody who's my mentor, kind of she was able to like straight up tell me like, that sounds like maybe you might have like some sensitivity and like you're getting kind of like waves of anxiety. Is there something that you're kind of like holding that, you want to put out there, you want to talk about with your family? And there was definitely some things that like I kind of like wanted closure from. And so that definitely helped me kind of talk about um, like how I had seen my mom growing up, and kind of how I wanted to move forward into kind of having like a more open household of like talking about mental health, especially since my younger brother, he's 6 years younger. He's about to go into high school, and I see him growing and kind of having the same behaviors that I had. Obviously, he doesn't have like an older brother that he like fights with and stuff like that. So like, kind of talking about what the different like outlets are that he could possibly go toward, and then me not being home because I'm at school, or my mom not being home the other time because she's at work, kind of triaging and seeing, how we could better help my younger brother, has been a conversation that has definitely helped. And, opening up about how I felt when we lost my mother and when we lost my father, has also helped me like kind of grow and like kind of realize like the limits of my body, and like also like the sensations that I feel when I start getting in my feels. um, some little fun fact though is that me and my mom both found out that we actually had really sensitive caffeine sensitivity. And so that was actually a relief because I started realizing, I'm a college student and I'm getting Starbucks every single morning, sometimes even in the nights when I need to stay up. And it's just like I see my friends, they get Red Bull, they get Monster, they get like their extra shot, their triple shot of espresso. And I would really dig, my Dunkin' and my Starbucks. And actually I kind of put a goal for myself and for my mother to like quit coffee like entirely. And so something I see with my mom now, because I've kind of been able to like fulfill that. I feel like I don't need caffeine anymore. It's helped kind of like bring down all of like my anxiety, like feelings like they used to be like really sharp, like waves of like dizziness, as well as like almost like panicky vibes. With my mom, her having the same thing. So now it's like, I'm wondering if it's like maybe a genetic thing, hereditary, because my younger brother, my older brother, they don't drink coffee at all. So it's just me and her kind of like exploring the space. We never really seek like professional help because I think the conversation that we can, or like the idea that we had in, growing up, both me and her, the rest of the family too, is just kind of like professional help is like when you're broken, therapy, psychology, psychiatry. It's something that's like very new, especially to like the Hispanic households, when like the visibility of like mental health isn't really there. It's not talked about.
Okay. So many pieces there that I was hearing, but a few that you just said. This discovery about caffeine is a really important one. When people are really caffeine sensitive, it's like so physiologically triggering of anxiety, or it exacerbates their anxiety. So I'm so glad that you and your mom were able to pinpoint that and cut down on the caffeine. And I also admire you because I confess that that is my socially acceptable addiction, is caffeine. So I admire that you've been able to cut back, Luis. That's really, that's great. I love that. And you mentioned genetics as well, and that can be a factor, both with caffeine sensitivity and anxiety. So, with mental health in general, we say there's causes that are biological, psychological, social, cultural, and spiritual. And caffeine is a big biological one for people. And I was struck by you saying that there's this belief in your family, maybe culturally, that therapy is for broken people. Therapy is for when you're broken. Would you say that you do believe that?
I would say I don't believe that, but I can say that, or what I'm saying is like I say that I don't believe that like therapy is for broken people anymore, but I do believe that that's definitely like a common like like stereotype that is like out there.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah. So it's like a prevailing stigma that I think used to be more mainstream in our society in general. And I've noticed that when I have conversations with folks who are Hispanic or Latino, that like that is a major theme that we land on. There was a previous guest on the YouTube channel. Oh, are we back?
Yeah. I'll get
Oh, is it a motion sensor?
it is. Oh my gosh.
Okay, no problem. Just do some jumping jacks every once in a while.
Yeah.
I was going to say there was a previous guest on the YouTube channel who actually had been my TA in my professor days. Her name's Jenny, and that was also a major theme of our conversation, is that culturally therapy was like not a thing, and just so much stigma, so much shame around the idea of even trying that.
Yeah. That's definitely something I see with a lot of like my friends and my family. And something that I would like encourage people to embrace is the fact that like you as a person can bring up that conversation at like various different levels. You could seek help at various different levels. And I would encourage you to open up with your family, and as well as like open up with like your peers and mentors, but more emphasis on mentors, especially people that have like, you know, a career, something that you're comfortable with. For me, it was my mentor, who's my professor. And she used to be a therapist. And so, what like your first, you know, couple minutes of this episode kind of like reminded me of is something that she always tells me, like, you know, like, I'm not going to give you like a therapy session, but I have those abilities, I have those skills, and I can point you to the right professionals. And, you know, that's when we start having that conversation is when I say, you know, like, I don't know if I'm willing to like commit to that. You know, it feels almost as if like, you know, you're signing up for here at USC. I believe they offer you like 5 free sessions, you know, under like our tuition and whatnot. And I'm like, that's a really big commitment, like 5 full sessions. When I know that, you know, speaking to my peers, you know, 5 sessions, you know, doesn't completely fix the problems. I have a bunch of friends that, you know, tell me how amazing their therapist is, you know, how that's their best friend and whatnot. And like having, you know, opened up a little bit to my professor and my friends, you know, has like got me second thinking, second guessing, you know, like in my earlier years, like, wow, like maybe therapy is a good thing, you know, and it's kind of like what you do with it, you know, that advice that you receive, the advice that I received from my therapist, you know, bringing that home, taking it to your friend spaces, really where you can be, you know, have that autonomy to bring visibility into mental health into your spaces. I think is something that we should all embrace, because, you know, we all have different levels of visibility in our friendship groups and our families. But, you know, there's something really great about being a college student, about being a teenager, that you get to meet so many different people, that you're almost like a sponge, and you could absorb the advice and bring it to your circles and bring that visibility that maybe might not be as accessible to somebody like my mom.
Yeah, and you've been like a change maker in your family by sparking that conversation. I suspect that's my gut, what my gut is telling me as we talk, and I think that's really incredible, Luis. And I love the fact that you've connected with this mentor of yours, who ironically has been a therapist in the past. And just, I think making those connections, especially with mentors, is really powerful. And that you've been able to open up to her and trust her and get some guidance. I mean, that can make such a difference. And on the topic of therapy, I mean, I'm 100% biased, right? Like, I love therapy. I love my therapy clients. I love doing therapy. I could have conversations like this with you, like for 9 hours, though I'm not going to keep you here that long. Don't worry. So I'm just all about it. I do notice that the conversation that seems to be happening like in our society right now is that we think mental health equals therapy, and like that's the only option for prioritizing our mental health. I think it's one really great option of many, because you talked about like the importance of friends, the importance of mentors, the importance of family relationships and opening up to your family and sparking that conversation in your family. All of that moves mental health forward for people. And, I think there's also a lot of really great apps out there, YouTube channels. I started like an online anxiety program for skill building around anxiety. So I'm just saying, like, I don't want people to feel like therapy is the only option for nurturing their mental health. And at the same time, if you are thinking about it, then I would encourage you. And it was surprising to me to hear you say like 5 sessions feel like a commitment, because, it just depends on the person. Like I have clients that I've seen for years.
Yeah. It's really great that you reminded me, and you're reminding all of us, that therapy obviously isn't the only option. And I feel like that kind of reminded me of like me kind of exploring like the level of autonomy that we have, for our mental health. There's definitely some cases, like especially when like the peak of like when I was like drinking so much caffeine that like I was so jittery. And that feeling that maybe many people could relate to, like feeling helpless, like that sense of helplessness when you can't control like like your feelings, your like heartbeat, like when you start noticing your body and it kind of feels like, whoa, that's weird, like that doesn't feel normal. And then kind of being like, I don't feel normal, but I don't want to scare anybody, so maybe I'll just keep that to myself. And like little by little I was able to kind of feel, like I feel the onset of those symptoms, and then I can kind of like gauge like what exactly is it that, like the limits and stuff like that. And so when somebody was finally able to like point out that it's, likely caffeine, I was able to, maybe try, instead of like my Starbucks, maybe I could drink Thai tea, which I thought didn't have that much caffeine, but in fact had much more caffeine. I also had to quit my boba, but I would take like little sips, and then, obviously a little sip isn't all the caffeine that I need to get that onset of my symptoms, but it's almost like the moment that I start thinking like anticipating these symptoms, like I start feeling, and it's like I feel like my mind telling me like, hey, like you need to stop, like you need to shut down, you can't go through with this, like don't take another sip. Whereas like for my mom, I feel like, she's a little bit older and she has more control of her mind wandering. So she actually hasn't fully quit it. So when she feels a little down in the dumps, she tells me, she hides it from me. But sometimes I see it, and she has to tell me that she got her little matcha or something like that. And so she'll drink like half of a grande, and she says she feels fine. And for me, I, kind of take pride in that she's able to do that, because she's my mom and I know that I can take after my mom. And so when, I like naturally start having like those sensations, I started thinking like, what are like my limits, and what can I do to kind of combat that? And the first solution that I ever found out was to just like take a nap and go to sleep. Like the anxiety didn't help when I was like, I have to like study for these exams. Like I have an exam tomorrow, I have an assignment to submit. Like literally just shutting down and falling asleep was like the best reward I could give myself, especially on those very stressful nights when I could like, be like a little bit envious of other people who could have like a glass of coffee or a mug of coffee. And then being able to wake up and feel refreshed and actually wake up a little bit earlier than my pals has actually, I feel like, given me a little bit of an edge. So I feel like my performance kind of like increased along with my confidence. But kind of going back to, the different resources that are out there for mental health, for me, something that's like immediately accessible to someone is those outlets. So I can think back to one of my first jobs, my second job in high school. I used to work for Parks and Recreation in a youth center. That used to be a boxing club, but now it's more so like a recreational youth center where like kids play soccer, basketball, and stuff like that. It was majorly ran not by us staff, but by fifth graders who would run us in circles and whatnot. And I had a boss, my supervisor, Oscar, um, who would, blast like Metallica in the background, and it's like, hey, like maybe that's not like the most professional thing for your boss to be doing. And then when his supervisors or managers would come by, he would like turn it down slightly, but still have it in the background. And so I would say, like why, like in your office, you're playing these songs, like, aren't they kind of distracting? Like, doesn't that distract you from work? He's like, no, it's my outlet, bud. And um, so, kind of me having that close relationship where I would see him every single day of the week, during high school when I would go after school to work, kind of being able to talk about that and be like, okay, so like it's your outlet. But what do you mean by that? He's like, yeah, like, we all, feel tired. We all feel angry, sad sometimes, not all the time. But for me, like music is my outlet and it recharges me. You don't have to wait till the very end, especially, in my case where I feel like all I have to, you know, look for is like hit the reset button by taking a nap or just, waiting till the very next day and just, what felt kind of like quitting at some points. I realize I can kind of have like a little bit more of a soft remedy, with an outlet. And so I remember, then I tried listening to Metallica, not really because I liked it, but because I kind of wanted to get on my boss's good side. And now it like totally stuck. Anybody that knows me knows that like 90% of my playlist is now Metallica. And like it always reminds me of, that supervisor and how I can kind of take an outlet and find, the things that I really enjoy, the things that I like can crave at times, and how that helps me combat my feelings of like stress, anxiety, and even, when I'm angry. And I feel like I didn't realize it at the time, but I would like be like, I feel like almost like a really angry person whenever like things didn't go my way. And then I could realize that like when I can anticipate those things, something that might be a little bit frustrating when I'm learning a new technique, when I'm taking a new class for the first time, going into it with my headphones or like on my drive to work and school, playing some Metallica or some of the other music that I've explored has like really helped me like set up for success. And even though I don't feel those symptoms as much anymore, I know that I can attribute some like my mental confidence to kind of that outlet. I don't know if you've kind of like experienced some of that, with some of your other clients, or if that's something common.
Music is huge. There's something about music that, regardless of what language it is in, it's the universal language. I mean, I also say that about coffee and about soccer, but it's true of music, right? That like it just transports us. And I think it affects us at a deeper level than is even like conscious, Um, and Metallica rocks. Yeah. I mean, I'm probably not as big of a fan as you are. Like, I'm not as well versed in their songs as you are, but growing up playing guitar, like I tried to play Fade to Black, which is like one of their darkest songs, but there's a really amazing riff in it. And yeah, I mean, I love that you found Metallica, and it sounds like some other bands as well that just speak to your anger or your frustration or fatigue. Yeah, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, those outlets, I think, they really help. It kind of gives you that level of autonomy where, like, I remember thinking, at first when my supervisor, like, I hearing that, I'm like, and he would also tell me, that him growing up, like, his mom wasn't really like approving of his music choices. Not only like the Metallica part, but also when it gets into like deeper, like thrash metal with like Slayer and Anthrax and stuff like that. But seeing how like, this person who was really a mentor, an icon, a community leader, and seeing how like he doesn't have like any such evil in him, with like, which is what like a lot of people do attribute to like some of those like heavier like metal songs. And seeing how you could kind of like transform an outlet and like just, the positivity, the response that you can have, and so I do like that song Fade to Black. um,
Mm.
the lyrics are a little bit like questionable at times when people hear it, but the song is like empowering. I listen to the chords, I listen to the progression, I listen to like the riff, and how that like brings me up and it lightens up my day a lot of the times. That is one of my favorite songs. um and I think something that I realized, that this person was doing, Oscar, with him knowing or without knowing, like he was kind of like sharing his outlet. And I think that's something that has also helped me. Not only do I encourage people to find their outlet, but also share it, because I feel like there's some strength in it. When you start seeing somebody, you invite somebody to share your outlet. Not only does it make you a little bit more comfortable, in these spaces where you are challenging your comfort zone. But it kind of like shows you how you might have seen yourself, or how other people might have seen you when you were first like exploring your outlet. And so something I want to share is that for 7 years, I used to play drums. I was part of the high school band. I was playing in middle school, drums. And, after I left high school, I didn't really like play drums anymore. There was like a little part of me that when I would like hear music, like I would like tap on my chest, tap on my legs, and like imagine myself playing drum set. And so that really was one of my like childhood outlets. Then it was, listening to music straight up. But something that I was able to share, is now, I still work in parks and recreation, but now I work in East LA in a park. And we have a music program for our teenagers. Um, our teenagers, I think, are a little bit more manageable to work with and to like reach out and share these outlets with, than our fifth graders. Because in my experience, the fifth graders, they really just thought they owned the place and they wanted to play basketball and soccer. And that just wasn't my outlet. So I feel like sharing that with them, it was like really competitive. And like there was like times that we were like all happy and times that we were all not happy. And sometimes there was like a mix of things. But since music was like a historical outlet for me, now with teenagers, since we have a music program, I feel confident like taking lead and like showing someone how to play drums, how I learned, taking real classes instead of just like based on vibes, on like what they hear in a YouTube video. And, I feel like that kind of helps break the ice a little bit. Not only like, with these teenagers who like don't really know me, who like see me as like just like a staff member there. And it builds my confidence, being able to like share my outlet and like kind of like showcase my skill of like, I know how to play music, I know how to read music, and I can teach you. It's like that feel good feeling. I know that's a little redundant, but like it really does like make me feel good. And I can see like how there's these like waves from the students who like sometimes they feel like a little bit embarrassed when I'm like, hey, like you're smacking the drums like way too hard. Let's try this. And so then, I can think back how it's like almost nostalgic how like I was like learning how to drum and like my teacher would tell me pretty much the same thing. And then, the obstacle or like the end goal was like, let's play our like end of semester concert. Versus over here, it's like this student in particular that I'm thinking about, like just wants to be a musician, just wants to be part of the band. And how I see kind of like that growth progression and seeing how that like outlet can kind of fit in. And how that kind of is my like little trick into talking about mental health to these students that were like, I see myself, when I was growing up in them. And how, like I said, like I feel like I'm kind of like tricking them into talking a little bit about mental health and how they can kind of use this. And I don't expect them to be musicians their whole life. I know this person's probably not going to be like the lead drummer for Metallica. But definitely I know that, at some point in their life, they're probably going to think back, when, this obstacle like presents themselves, with mental health. If like I said, growing up, like it wasn't really a huge issue. And I attribute to the fact that we didn't really talk about it in my family so much to the fact that we were like pretty well off and like, not financially, but at least with the family, like we were all together. And so I can say that this student, has experienced or not experienced like any major issues in their lives where like understanding mental health fundamentally could help them. But I know like sharing that outlet with people can kind of give them like a little bit more to their arsenal, to their like stepping stones towards them understanding and being able to resolve issues like on their own. And that's something that I, again, like echo. I would encourage somebody to share their outlets.
Share your outlets. And music is an incredible one that you really light up when you talk about music. And I can tell that you're passionate about it. And not only playing the drums and appreciating Metallica as an outlet, but also sharing that with folks who are younger than you, teenagers, maybe not the fifth graders, but the teenagers, yes. And something that I sometimes think about, Luis, is that all of us need people of an older generation who are pouring into us, and all of us need younger folks of a younger generation that we can pour into. It reminds me of this painting I saw at a friend's house once, where it was like there was like a bowl in the center that was holding water, but there was a bowl up here pouring water into it, and then it was pouring water into a bowl down here. And it's kind of a metaphor to say like we all need to be poured into, and we all need to be pouring out. And I'm explaining this because I see both of those levels in your life, where you have your family, you have mentorship in your life, and you also are someone who is pouring into folks who are younger than you.
Wow. I could really imagine that. And that totally makes sense. It's not some like, I feel like before this, I kind of felt like it was just like some like magic, like life hack that like I found to like being able to like understand your body and understand how you could kind of, combat like the symptoms that you might be struggling with. But definitely like, I do see how that like fits in, how I can remember like my boss pouring into me and then also like him lighting up. And now you're probably seeing that a lot in me. It's something that I feel like is nice to kind of like remind someone because like now that kind of gives me the feel good feeling, and it encourages me to open up and pour into other people, as well as like accept people's like advice and let them open up and like pour into me a little bit more. I feel like the easiest thing is to like shut down and think that like somebody isn't going to help you, or like they don't understand like what's going on. But like as you kind of like with your painting, the way that like you're positioned in the same place and that water just naturally drops in, I feel like it's really easy to just have a normal conversation with somebody just like we're having today, and seeing how those commonalities, they just flow in, how they just appear, and like you just would never know about these people, the commonalities that you have, but just through conversation, through sharing your outlets, how you kind of realize that, how you can strike up a conversation and come out of the conversation having a new friend and feeling better about yourself, as well as kind of building into your arsenal of like tools that you have when you're feeling down.
Absolutely. And when we started this conversation today, like this is the first time you and I are talking, and I didn't realize your love for music. I didn't know that you were a drummer, and you didn't know that I really love music and have a musical background as well. And it's just amazing where the conversation goes, right? I have to tell you, just as a funny thing, there's a podcast that I listen to that is for female runners. Okay, so like I'm a female runner. It's a very different target demographic, and I've listened to this podcast for a while. And she's like this very sweet, mom, but she's also a very, very high level like exercise physiologist. And this episode made me laugh because she's so high level that she used to work at the NFL. And so she was like, whenever I run, I learned from those NFL guys, you got to put on heavy metal. And I was like, where did this come from? She's like talking about Slipknot, and I think she might have mentioned Korn, some other bands that I hadn't heard of. But I was like, whoa, okay. Like, this is just a heavy metal time, I guess. Like, let's go,
Yeah. There's definitely, which by the way, a female running podcast, that sounds really empowering, for you. I hope that has kind of helped, your journey into like running. I don't know if you do like long distance, or if, you're working towards like a 5K or a 10K. I actually used to run a little bit when I was in cross country in high school. So that's also like a commonality that we're kind of finding. I don't anymore, but it's something that I'm open to like getting back into, especially like in the summer when I have a little bit more free time and I don't have to worry about those assignments. Um, but that's so interesting that you mentioned, I guess the NFL guys, like they play their classic heavy rock, Slipknot, Corn, and it's these spaces that where I get to like kind of like discover like a new band or a new song, things that like um, kind of like going back to it, like you're adding to the tools that you can use. Um, I wonder if that has kind of helped you like improve your running. Like I feel like when I remember when I first, back in high school when I started running, I kind of would just like run around the park and like think that I was just going to get better. um, but for me, like my like encouragement to run a little bit more was like watching YouTube videos of like the Olympians, like how they grew into their sport and how they owned the space and how they performed very well, and then also talking to my coaches and the higher seniors who were already like kicking butt out there, and how that kind of helped me. And I wonder if that's kind of like what you feel like listening to that podcast, where you feel somebody that you can identify with, somebody that's a female, somebody that's a runner, maybe like you see that as your running buddy. Is that kind of something you see?
Yeah. And I haven't even officially joined their community yet. Like I probably should. I just haven't taken that step. But I would say the main thing is encouragement, like encouragement about what is possible and encouragement to keep going. And Olympians, I totally feel so inspired by them. Like Clayton Young is a US marathoner who has a YouTube channel, and it's the best YouTube channel of all the YouTube channels, if you don't mind me saying, is Clayton Young's running YouTube channel. But like, yeah, he documents like his training leading up to when he ran the Olympics in Paris. Were the Olympics in Paris? They were in France. Was it Paris? Anyway, in France recently. Um, and then he just ran Boston, the Boston Marathon. And so you get to see the process of all that training. And I guess from a mental health perspective, what's so valuable too is something like running can really benefit our mental health. And I think a nuanced perspective is that someone at that level of an Olympian, or even people who are cross country in high school or college, like there's a mental health battle for sure around the sport and around performance and around, comparison to other people. I mean, that is a whole thing as well for athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think running and these like track events, I feel like they're pretty great metaphor to kind of like what we experience in life, where we see an end goal and we see people that like completed that end goal, that have completed that marathon. And it's really easy to be like, I want to work towards running a marathon, but I can't even run a 5K. I can't even get off the couch sometimes. And whether you're a runner or not, I feel like you have those journeys that you want to take. For me, a couple years back, it was like I want to finish my bachelor's. I want to get that, but like nobody in my family has ever gotten a bachelor's, so like it feels like that's like so strange. It feels like maybe it's like taking a huge risk. And then it was also like I want to maybe try to get on a master's program, but I don't know if I can get into that because maybe there's like a secret formula, that, you need to get in, for that. Like maybe you just got to be in the know and, then you get accepted into those master programs, or you need to know what are the research positions and stuff like that. Like what is a thesis is kind of like what I was thinking about. And similar to, like marathon running or, running in general, it's like, you can see that end goal and you got to be able to take a step back and maybe talk to those people, maybe hop on a podcast, hop on a YouTube video for that inspiration, and kind of like become part of that community and see, what the steps are, what the steps are for you. Cause everybody has a different journey, finishing your bachelor's degree. For some people, it's a little bit more easier. Some people have a little bit more guidance, right? But maybe they don't have, the academic confidence to kind of like perform well in their classes. And I've also known people who, they just have like this academic prowess where they just, get A's everywhere, but they don't have like that level of guidance. And so they might be driving themselves into like, taking these classes that maybe they didn't really need or didn't really enjoy. And so I feel like there's always this like, pull out and like pull in, and like, you give and you take, and you got to remind yourself, you can always like take a step forward, but you can always take a step back to kind of review, what it is that you're doing. And I feel like that's what I've kind of been doing, in my life, how I've got into the position of like getting like my dream internship. I definitely like can think back at times when like maybe I was taking the wrong class, or I was taking the wrong steps, or I was trying so hard to like get into this club that like maybe like really wasn't for me. And kind of like to that like marathon running, like there's like, this need to like I want to finish that finish line, and I know that I got to take these steps. So you just like want to jump over there, but really like I feel like I want to encourage people to take one step at a time and look one step at a time, but then also like look back and like give yourself a pat on the shoulder, because like where I'm at, getting like the internship of my dream, I feel like I can look back at all my accomplishments that I've done, the times where like I've fallen short, and how I can improve that in the next steps that I can take, as well as like the things that I did that were really great, that I can kind of like mirror and like teach to other people who want to get to that same marathon end goal. And they can also share, the things that they did, kind of like reflect onto each other, pour into each other, if you will, and help each other have a little running buddy to get to that end goal. Now that I'm going into my fourth year, I'm confident as heck that I will finish my bachelor's degree, and it will be a fun final year for me. But I can't say that I would have said the same thing when I was first starting college. And now that it's commencement week, and in a couple months, new students are going to be coming in. Like, I bet that they feel kind of, the same thing when you're like a new runner, and, you want to get the marathon, and you see all these people graduating in their commencement week, and like, wow, they can do it, but I don't know how to do it just yet. It's just like, you got to be able to take that step forward.
Take that step forward and take it one step at a time, just like you said, Luis. And I love running metaphors, so I could probably go with these all day with you on running metaphors. But yeah, if we look at college as a marathon, we really need to take it one step at a time. We sometimes need to take a step back, take a step forward, look behind us at how far we've come, and I think pace ourselves. Like, something that I worry about is when students seem like they're sprinting a marathon. And I understand why it happens, because there's so much academic pressure, and there's so much comparison, right? And then it's almost this cruel irony, that the more high achieving you are as a student, the more exposed you get to other people who are high achieving, and then the more pressure it adds. It's just sort of this, like, I don't know, pressure cooker type thing. And yes, I know that pressure makes diamonds. I just also want people to pace themselves. And so for your internship, for example, I'm going to ask you about it in a second. But before I do, like, for anyone watching this, there's so much pressure to get an internship. And I'm realizing, especially over summer, it feels like this massive thing to students that, like, if you don't get an internship, it's this huge, shameful thing. And I just want to say, if you don't get an internship, you're going to be okay. And you need to look at the marathon of not only college, but please, like, the next 10 or 20 years of your life, like having a summer without an internship. I hope you rest, and I hope that you take a break and prioritize your mental health. If you didn't get an internship, have fun, like, have a fun summer. But I do want to flex a bit, Luis, because you got your dream internship. So can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. So this summer, I'm going to be interning at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the NASA centers, that's, federally funded also by Caltech. So Caltech is like the one that owns it. And Caltech is like a dream school for like any engineer. JPL is like a dream place to work for anybody that loves planetary exploration, especially for those Mars robotics and whatnot. I'm going to be working in the Earth Sciences Directorate, doing research in cost modeling, specifically, trading between, constellations as well as, small satellites and even the larger satellites, and proposing how we can kind of better address climate uncertainty in the long run, and how we kind of drive those out as like NASA projects, or even for philanthropies for people that have those funds and want to get on the train and start building their wealth a little bit more. But definitely, I could have never imagined myself, to be here. This is going to be my summer after my junior year, but definitely the summer after my sophomore year, I didn't have an internship. I actually worked on campus, and I worked at my park. And so I kid you not, it sounds like an exaggeration, but I had like about like 150 applications my sophomore year that I put into the pool of interns. And I did not get a single like call back from anything, not an interview. Like, I know that there's a couple people who like, they got to do an interview with Amazon or something like that, and they didn't get it, but it still feels good that like, at least you were recognized. Like, at least, that you're in the pool of like applications that like are at least being read. There's something to that. And it was so discouraging to like not get even a single callback. Out of like those 109 applications, I think like half of them like send you like an official like rejection notice, and then the other half like is just like you get ghosted. And so like, there's like points where like, well, maybe they still haven't like released their decisions. Maybe like they're like reading my application at this point. And sometimes like you got to be okay with that like uncertainty, and like, start making other plans, and don't pretty much like put all your eggs in one basket. So not only saying like apply to like various different places, but also kind of see how you can like use your free time. For me, it's like summertime, as a student, as any other student, watching this podcast, can kind of like hear or like foresee like the free times that you may have. For me, it was like, I have the option of like interning somewhere. I have the option of working, at the park, picking up another job at school, and or maybe just like spending the free time and like, going to the gym and working out. And for me, what I decided, early on is like, I want to be serious about working. I want to be serious about like, what does like a full-time job feel like? Like, I know what it feels like to be a full-time student, in the sense that like, I can show up to classes and like, sometimes I'm a little sleepy. Sometimes I'm like falling asleep, but I can be there present for like 1 to 2, even 3 hours for the longer classes. But I can confidently say that even in some of those classes, I'm like checked out. And I know when you have a full-time job, you are there. For my case, it was like 9 to 5 p.m. for my USC on-campus job. And for the other case, for the park, it was like literally staying from like 5 to like 10 p.m. And, there was definitely some days, on the special event days where it was like on Fridays, that I was staying, not only from my 9 to 5 job, but also tagging on that extra park work from 5 to 10 p.m. And it was like a different challenge that I was able to kind of address. And I don't know if this like totally helped me get like an internship this time around. I feel like this time around, like, the industry kind of like shaped itself a little bit more, where like there was more opportunities, and they look more towards like people of junior standing that have, these like prerequisite skills like CAD, or their statics, dynamics, and deforms, for like you engineers that are listening, and you probably know what that's about. But instead, I was kind of able to address like these prerequisites for like, being a worker, being an adult, of, that capability of like showing up to work and like not shutting down, not being able to like turn that off and be like, yeah, like I can always look back at the slides. There's these things that I have to do at the park, like, serve the community, if we're like hosting like an all girls like basketball games, or if it's like an adult like soccer league, things that I got to do at the scoreboard. Because, that one time that I did try like kind of checking out a little bit, those gentlemen, they did get a little mad, like, hey, you like, we just scored like 3 points, like, and you only marked 2 points for the basketball game. Like, that was definitely a 3-pointer. And they're like arguing with me, and I'm like, like, should I tell them like, no, like I saw it was only a 2-pointer, or should I just, concede and be like, yeah, I'm daydreaming right now. So it was like something, these times, these free times that you get, like, you can always kind of address something else that can still work towards that end, like, marathon goal. And so this time around, I feel like I have it down. Like, I know how to show up and, put on a show, and be locked in for those long hours. And I know I'm going to be able to do that. And I know people will be impressed, because I know talking to some of my other friends who've like had internships, like their biggest struggle is like, showing up and like being consistent and not letting that same like burnout that we get in school kind of affect your internship. If it's like 10 weeks, 12 weeks, you don't want to start, one foot in the door and one foot out the door, not being able to be confident and like building those skills, to be able to like show up for those long 40-hour weeks. And then also like towards the end, not being one foot out the door and still one foot in because like you just want to leave now that you're like tired, and like kind of burnt out. So I feel like it's going to be a really great summer. I feel like it's going to be really rewarding, and I would hope that they, call me back to do like academic part-time, or even after if they want to like fund my, research sometime, or if they want to have me again, like as a full-time, like upon graduation, that would be so amazing. But I know that, all the free time that I was able to optimize, kind of like work towards that. And I can feel myself be like a better individual, a better adult. Something else I want to mention though is like, don't feel like you have to, put something in that free time, because something that I totally enjoy, and I don't know if you could relate, but like having those moments of like nothing where like I can just relax, there is definitely like these weekends when like I had tons of work, I had tons of assignments. I'm like, I have to get this done. On this day I have to do this. On this day I have to do this. On this day I have to do this. And that's probably like a 3-day weekend. And by Saturday, like past Friday, Saturday, I was supposed to do 2 things and I didn't do anything. And then it's like Sunday, and like now I'm cramming 3 different things at the same time. And although that didn't feel as good at the time on Sunday, I was having a lot of fun on Friday and Saturday, relaxing, watching my TV shows, hanging out with my family. And then, now looking back at those weekends, like those were probably like some like my best times. And, I just like want to encourage people to, take advantage and like intentionally allocate some free time. Cause now that I do that, now that I realize, the feel good sensation of free time and relaxation, I can like even try to schedule that instead of trying to like put one thing in each basket, one thing every single day of the weekend. I try to give myself a little bit of a rest day, and that has kind of helped me a little bit more. And, not only has it helped me, kind of balance my week a little bit more, but it's also kind of helped me like be a little bit less hard on myself about procrastinating. I feel like I'm like a professional procrastinator, where I can get everything done on Sunday. Sometimes, the quality isn't all there, but I think, being like a professional procrastinator, is very much in line with like being able to allocate that free time. And I think it just makes you a brighter, a happier person.
Rest is so, so, so important. And I really worry about students who don't have rhythms of working and resting, because like, when do you ever reset? Right. And so I'm so glad that you have found a rhythm of that for yourself, Luis. And I hope you protect that time, just that free time, relaxation, time with your family, time to do nothing. I didn't really discover that until grad school for myself. And this was in my doctorate, which is like, there's a fair amount of reading and assignments that needed to be done. Right. But I kind of discovered a rhythm for myself of like, Sunday is going to be a rest day. And I feel like it sounds really wild when I try to explain it to people that like that works. I still do that when I can, with flexibility, but like, it's counterintuitive. But like, if you protect rest time, you are more fresh on all the other days, and you just bring a better version of yourself to the other days, instead of this like burned out version where, if you're burning, what's the expression? You're burning the wick at both ends or whatever, like, we just need that reset. And then it's just better throughout the week. That's what I found for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it is one of those things where it's like easier said than done to like, allocate that intentional like rest time, have those like Sundays for rest. Cause I'm pretty sure you could relate maybe in your grad school, like your peers who are like in their residency or completing their doctorate also, like it feels like everybody has these like missions to accomplish, that like maybe it's the same essay, maybe it's the same exam, maybe it's like the MCAT, like before you started like grad school for like the medical doctors. But definitely, like, I feel like there's that like pressure, going back to like what you were talking about, of like, if you all have to finish this, like you want to be able to like, be in the know. Like that's how I feel sometimes. Like I want to be able to like also finish the exam or the essay with the same quality as other people, and that's kind of like in these spaces like grad school, or like even in high school too. Like, there's that pressure that you just can't fight, of like, are people going to do better than me? I just want to do, that like driving average. Like if everyone does so amazing and maybe you relax a little bit too much, like, is that going to be like the end of the world? Sometimes it feels that way. And so for me, I would encourage people to open up and talk about it with your peers, because for the longest time, I was like really like being so hard on myself. Like, come on, like I can just do one more thing on Saturday, even though I'm like absolutely tired, like after an event. But I gotta keep up, and like that's like insomnia. And then even though I stayed up and I finished something on Saturday, I was like absolutely pooped on Sunday, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get up. I was like, instead of where like it might have been like my low key rest day, or like the day when I could like finish that assignment and make it look like perfection. Instead, I was stuck doing my normal chores on Sundays, like washing dishes, doing my laundry and stuff like that. So even though like I felt like, I had to do something on Saturday because I thought everybody else was doing something on Saturday and everybody else was gonna do this like insane quality work. I really could have, spent that time like resting a little bit more and recharging, so I could have a more productive Sunday. And, opening up that door of conversation to other peers, they're able to share like, hey, like I procrastinate and I'm definitely going to save this till the last minute on Sunday. Like there's no way my professor expects me to do this and like eat up my whole week. You go to lecture, and especially like I can think of one specific professor that would always be like, okay, this is due in 2 weeks. And, that's because every single day you're supposed to be working on this report 2 hours, 3 hours, no, even if you can, like 4 hours on this assignment every single day. And I'm just like thinking like, wow, there's 160 people in this class. If 160 people put 4 hours every single day, I can't just procrastinate this. And it kind of has helped me like procrastinate a little bit less and like space out the time that I put in. But definitely like I can still like go based on the vibes that are around me, talking to my friends, and they and is like giving me the chance and the autonomy to also say like, hey, I'm not going to work 4 hours every single day. Maybe I'll work 2, and then maybe I can give and take a little bit and say, okay, I will not work 4 hours every single day, but I can definitely spend 8 hours on a Saturday. That sounds like a lot. It's a full shift, but that has like saved me some time and some sanity throughout the week. And it's still, it's like, what's my best quality? Because I can dedicate 4 hours every single day. And maybe that's like the professor's like vision of what like great quality is. But for me, when I dedicate like those little times, it's just like not the way that I work best. And it kind of like drags and it bleeds into the other things that I have to do. Like I've seen myself often when I try to give myself this like very harsh military schedule, and like I end up like neglecting like maybe like my cats, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't feed you, like what? And then there's other times when like, I try to like, see what is in my capabilities, to allocate that time and like bring it back like intentionally, so I can, be my most successful self and be the highest quality that I can put myself through. And the only way that I was able to do that is again through like talking to my peers and seeing how they have that autonomy, how they've learned it, or how some people haven't learned it, and how I can help them do it a little bit better. And then all together we help each other up, get to that end finish line. And, it's worked so far. I think I'm doing something right.
I think you're doing many things right. And I hear maturity in what you're saying. I think part of maturity is being able to say, okay, I hear what my professor is saying about how many hours I need to spend on this assignment every single day. That might work for other people. What I'm learning about myself in college is that I do better, like maybe deep work in a 4-hour chunk, or on Saturday, an 8-hour chunk rather than 2 hours every day. And so I'm hearing your maturity in that, Luis, because I think that's part of what we learn in college is like, okay, that might work for other people. I know myself, I know my work style. I have kind of trialed and errored this a little bit. And I also know I want to protect some time for rest. And so, you sound like you're very much still putting in the time for the assignment that the assignment warrants or requires, but you're doing it in your own way. And I've noticed in our conversation, the word normal has come up a lot. And I think so, like, for example, when we were talking about this assignment, it was helpful for you to talk that out with friends and hear that sometimes other people procrastinate or hear how other people might be approaching an assignment. So it can be helpful when we hear what other people are doing, or we kind of look around like, okay, what are other people doing on a Saturday, right? But this idea of normal is it's like a hard one for me, because earlier in our conversation, you were like, when you were younger, like middle school and high school, you were like, I think you actually said, I'm not normal because I'm having this anxiety or I'm having this sadness. And I don't even know what my question is for you about this, but I just wanted to give like that kind of reflection that like the word normal has come up a lot. And I hear that concept a lot, even in how you're talking about your study habits and stuff. It feels like normal is such a common word that people use, and I feel like it's also a dangerous idea. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think like the concept of normal is something that's like intrinsically like attached like from like a societal perspective like onto like people onto yourself. You think that there's like one way to do something right. And if that was the case for mental health, then I think people would just write a book and we would be reading the books. There's like that one solution, one formula, just like what like a normal cake looks like. You follow the steps to bake a cake and then it comes out right, or you didn't do it right and now it's not a normal cake. It's all mushy, it's squishy, it's not, it's like overflowed out of the pan, or it's burnt, something like that. So really, I think, it's a great thing that you called that out, because normalcy is definitely not what humans are. It's definitely not what like mental health is. I feel like everyone has, a unique upbringing. Everyone has like a unique composition. Everyone has a unique way that they perceive mental health. And that's why it's like so important to have like these conversations, to talk to these mentors like yourself, who could kind of give them that autonomy and kind of like break that like incessant habit to like want to call something normal. I can like concede and say that like I want to call things normal. I want to feel normal. But, there's like something empowering of like breaking away from, what I think is normal. And, instead like taking that, flipping the coin and thinking about it as like my unique self, like my best quality. Because kind of like what we were saying, like what that normal expectation was of like the allocation for the assignment, that was like me trying to fit into something normal when my optimal place was far from normal in that case. There's definitely some other cases where my optimal place is more common, right? I won't call it normal, but it's more common and it's easier to talk about. It's easier to relate to. But then there's other things like my caffeine sensitivity that isn't as common with every single person, right? So my common level of like caffeine intake that I see here in college is like crazy. So that's why I feel out of, that common place. But being able to understand your unique circumstances and working around like your schedule, tailoring your life, to your unique circumstances is something that, little by little, you get to like acknowledge like your limitations, you get to work with them and really empower yourself to be the best version of yourself. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, being your unique self, being the best version of yourself. I really love that, and I really resonate with that in how I want to encourage people. And I just really struggle with this idea of normal. Like, it's a really painful thing that when people are struggling with their mental health, frequently almost always we hear them say, I want to be a normal, typical college student. I want to be a normal, typical teenager. And their parents will tell me, I want them to be a normal, typical kid. And I hear the heart behind that. And I want to join with them toward that goal. I think we can take the goal even a step further when we say, I want to help you be your unique self. I want to help you be the best version of yourself. Yeah, I love how you said that. And I think normal is tricky because, we could be statistical nerds and talk about the normal curve, right? Like, just because something is statistically common doesn't even mean that it's normal necessarily. But it would be really cool if all of us could just feel the freedom to step into being our unique selves.
Yeah, like echo that, because really I feel like that's like the progression towards like understanding like fundamentally like what mental health is for you. For me, in my case, like my family is like understanding how like our unique like upbringing, our unique circumstances can kind of open up the different like mediums of talking about mental health. For my family, like, growing up and like up to this point, like it really wasn't like professional help. I bet that could have been a catalyst. And it's a common medium that people do take. I think probably more common is to just like reject it, kind of like how we did like growing up. But then like little by little, we're like kind of like unveiling the curtain, like exposing and being able to talk about the different resources that are accessible to us and learning a little bit more about it and seeing how, straying away from the concept of like what is normal to what, feels good for us, right? Like as a family. And I kind of want to bring this like conversation to my mother a little bit, because I actually, I wonder if like maybe my reason for like, jumping in with that like normal word, I'm kind of thinking that like my mom likes to repeat it a lot, especially when it comes to this topic. It's something as like, it's like a little sliver when it comes to like, caffeine. It almost feels kind of like a joke that we're like talking about like how we can't drink like caffeine a little bit. But she does say like, oh, like I want to feel like a little bit normal when like my bosses are, drinking that like 9 a.m. cup of Joe. Even for me, I just had a meeting with a mentor last week, and we're like he had told me like, oh, we should meet at Starbucks, and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, what am I gonna get at Starbucks? Like, for those of you who don't know, like at Starbucks, like even those like strawberry acai lemonade, they're like charged lemonade with like a little tiny bit of caffeine. Those decaf drinks, they're charged with a little bit of caffeine, and like maybe that's not like that won't like go towards my tolerance, but like I haven't developed that comfortability with caffeine again for me to like kind of like want to try it a little bit, since I like literally like one drop of caffeine will probably make me overthink like crazy. And so I feel like bringing that conversation to kind of like your circle of like, like tailoring life to your unique circumstances would probably make your own life like a little bit better too. So like me thinking of like how I would eventually have that conversation with my mother, like I bet it would kind of shed some light onto like how she can make her life a little bit better. And in that case, like I think it makes my life feel a little bit more complete if my mom's happy, and my mom understands that like the unique circumstances that we can kind of like optimize in our life is something that she can apply to her personal life, to her kids, and that would like give me like a sense of comfortability, kind of on the note of like me mentioning how like I might be a little bit worried that like my little brother, like I'm not going to be there all the time, because I'm going to be working, or like my mom's going to be working, and knowing that like we kind of have this like these expectations or like this freedom, this level of understanding for mental health that we can talk about, I think like kind of like provides a nurturing environment for your circle of friends, or for my case, my family, my little brother who, I see myself in, and who will like eventually grow up to be my age, and eventually maybe like a parent himself to like my mom.
Yeah. This might be a more challenging question, so feel free to just say pass if you don't want to talk about this. But I'm just curious, like, what is a conversation that hasn't happened yet between you and your mom about mental health that you want to have?
Yeah. I definitely want to answer this because I'm probably going to send this podcast or this episode to my mom so she can watch it. Because, like, we don't, like, as mentioned, like, we've never really talked to somebody who is a professional like yourself. So there's definitely like like, something like magical of like, having this conversation with you. Cause like, it feels like you just like get me, I, um, and so something that I specifically like haven't had the conversation, and like it's often because like we all set boundaries, and sometimes you assume people's boundaries. Like with like my mom specifically, something I want to share is that or I don't know if I've already mentioned it, but not only like did we lose my grandmother, her mom, but we also eventually also lost my father. And it was a really sad time. I feel like for me, I have already like grown and like to accept like, the situation, and like, I think very fondly of the memories that I have with my dad, and I carry him with me like everywhere I go. But it was something like really taboo between like me and my brothers, where like somebody like wants to ask because they're curious. And it was like, wait, like you don't talk about that like in front of her, like, like be a little bit more respectful, or something like that. But I have no idea, she talks about it and we're like, okay, like now we can talk about it because she's talking about it. But we're all like just assuming that her boundary is like, you can't talk about it yet. There's no like common time. Like there's no like certain, like after 2 years, now you can talk about it. Like obviously, my dad was, her partner, and it's probably like feels a little bit different, to have that like void. And so like a specific question that I would want to ask her is like, how did you kind of deal with that? How did that impact you? And like, how were you able to find strength to kind of like move forward? Because like, honestly, I think she was a really strong pillar, helped me kind of find closure and move on a little bit from that. But I know that maybe deep down, like she wasn't as strong. And then maybe, on the other side, she might have seen, us, like specifically me, because I was like the one that was like closest to my dad. How she might have seen that I was like maybe um a little bit stronger. And I know she's told me like, between then and now, like how strong I am. And sometimes like it feels really awkward when people tell you like you're so strong, or like you've dealt with like a lot, and you've grown so much. It kind of feels like sometimes it's like, well, thank you, but like I don't feel that strong. Like I haven't really been strong. And sometimes it feels like when like you haven't been like totally honest. But it's honestly like a different vibe. And so I would love to have that conversation with her of how like I feel like you've been strong, but like have you? And like kind of like open up the space, and maybe her ask me like how I've been strong, and how maybe there's like some times when like I didn't want to be strong, and I've like peeled off to like cry a little bit. Or how like there's been these conversations with other people where I'm like, hey, like don't talk about that with my mom, like she's not ready yet. And like maybe like, well, what are your boundaries? Like what are you open to talking about? It's been about 2 years already, going on to 3. So like I would want to talk about that with her, and maybe even open it up a little bit more to like my older brother and my younger brother, who also I think are like really strong pillars in my life, even though they're just my brothers. I want to know like how you find strength, because like I feel like I've grown into that, and it was like a long journey before I could feel strong again, without that like strong pillar of my father. And I would want to know like how my mom kind of like dealt through that, and how I could probably like bounce some ideas off her, and like some suggestions on how I was able to build that. And then maybe just kind of like find how those like unique circumstances kind of like tailor throughout the family structure, and how like we can kind of be stronger for like future generations, like my younger brother. And as well as like bring it up and like pour into the people that are above us too, like our older family and friends.
I hope that you do get to have this conversation with your mom. And maybe even, her watching this would be a spark for that. So hello, Luis's mom. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you do get to have that conversation. I was noticing this idea of being strong and strength. And if you ask a lot of therapists, Luis, we're going to be biased about strength and say, like, oh, like when you cry, it is a sign of strength. When you ask for help, it is a sign of strength. So we kind of, blend things that way. But do you have an expectation coming from somewhere that you are supposed to be strong?
I do feel that like there's this expectation where like especially like the way that I grew up, I feel like, having that like competitive like nature with my older brother, like growing up, it's like, the moment that I would cry, because I was the younger one, with my older brother, the moment that I would cry, like we would stop whatever we're doing. It's like, come on, like you just ruined it. Like you're not strong, you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like some of that, like, like early stuff that's like just intrinsic within like your upbringing, like kind of like bleeds into that. And so for me, like specifically, like, there was like a lot of times when like I felt like I was crying. I'm like, no, like I just like fighting it back. And like it hurt a lot more to fight it back. If it hurt like I was actually like a little bit more weaker when I was like trying to like fight back tears. And then when I would like find my comfortable place to like let them out, it felt like strong. It felt like a release, if that kind of makes sense. And so definitely I feel very fortunate to have that evolving idea of what strength looks like. It's like your reaction to a response and how like that brings you up or brings you down, how that kind of shifts your perspective. And so for me, I feel like my strength meter is like what tells me like after this, conversation, after this action, after this thought, like, am I a better person now? Am I, working towards being more comfortable, more accepting of the situation? And I think like my whole family has done a pretty good job of being strong. And at least, we haven't really talked so much about the topic of mental health, but when it comes to strength, yeah. And I will concede though, like, I think I've been a little bit more hard on myself with the strength side of things. Such that like I would, talk about, the situation, with my father and then like, get to a point and then just say like, yeah, and that's, the whole story and just like end it off there. But actually recently, like I was able to kind of talk about like the whole story of like what I remember happened, like, up towards like those years. And like, I definitely like shed some tears with like my mentor who I confidently shared it to. And it just, it felt empowering. It felt like I wasn't judged. And so like, definitely, I feel like, there's those people that you trust, your close circle that you can kind of like really embrace and see what strength looks like, because you do like at some point like have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes if you're like by yourself or if you're with people that you don't totally feel comfortable with, that strength like can't really come out, and so you feel as if you're nothing but weak. There was times where I feel like, well, I'm by myself and like I can I can be strong, or I don't have to be weak, or like I don't have that fear of judgment. But definitely, when I was by myself, like I feel like I wasn't totally comfortable to be alone, in those situations. And so that's why it was a lot easier to repress the feelings of like that release of being able to cry, like honestly, such that I felt like, I was weak and only weak, and I couldn't, I didn't have that like skill set to like be strong. So it's like really, that level of intentionality of like, setting yourself up for success, for acceptance, and that like conversation that like easily helps, before and afterwards. For that, it's the mentors, it's my parents, and yeah.
We need other people to be strong because I think we strengthen each other. Those connections strengthen us together. And when you said, what does strength look like for each person? I just had like all these images of, I was like, oh, that's so profound, because it relates back to how we were talking about being our unique self, being the best version of ourselves. And strength can look differently for each of us. And that's true even when we look at like different people have different bodies, right? So like there's one person is an Olympic power lifter. That's their version of strong. Someone else is in ballet. They have a different, very different body type. And that is their version of strong that enables them to do something different that perhaps they were designed for. If someone is coming out of a coma, a sign of strength is to be able to like bat their eyelash. And, you know, for a baby, strong is being able to take one step and like support their own body. And so anyway, I just love how you talk about that theme of strength and how you find strength. You sound very curious about how your mom has found strength, and I do hope you get to have that conversation. But I also love this idea of like strength can look differently for each of us.
Yeah, definitely. It's another great theme that we're talking about. The different forms of strength, and something I kind of like want to kind of like bring to light and kind of like mention that I've kind of like grown to learn a little bit is that it's never too late to be strong. I think a lot of people feel like it's like a binary, like strength or weak. You come at a standstill, like you're either in or you're out. You have like a situation that like you just weren't prepared for, and again, like you were either strong and you faced it, or you were weak. But I want to say that like there's never really like a time limit to be strong or to be weak. And like more specifically, I think I want to encourage people to be strong, and like those little moments that you feel like you might have been a little weak, or you just weren't content with the strength that you like showcased. Whenever you feel comfortable, you can revisit that and find a little bit more strength. And so I've actually had that be the case with like some of my friends who like they may have experienced like an unfortunate situation. If it was like bullying or something like that, and they're like, I just couldn't, like I was in high school and I just couldn't, I stopped going to school and I was just weak. And something that they kind of beat themselves about, and I think many people can relate, is like, you can't change the past. Like they wish that they could have stood up for themselves. They would have talked to an adult or something like that. But something I remember sharing is that it's just never it's never too late to be strong. They're able to like revisit that and like kind of think about how they would talk about it with their friends, and people would be like, it's not a big deal, with if they're like making fun of you for your clothes or for the way that you do your makeup. It was never too late for them to be strong, because they could realize, looking back, even though it was like all the way in high school, and I know that's only like 4 years ago, they're able to kind of like realize and kind of see like how these people kind of affected their life, and how like maybe this person was a really good friend because they supported them through that, or maybe this person was maybe not the best friend because they let it happen. And so kind of looking back and like closing out, like finding that closure, thinking about the situation, and talking about it with me, I think was a really strong thing that they did. I think, you know, going away from that, like maybe they won't be bullied anymore in life, but definitely I can say that they're a stronger person because they know how to select their friends now. They know when they're being, when they see these reactions, of like somebody letting other people kind of, talk to you a certain way, or somebody sticking up for yourself, for you, when you can't do that same thing for yourself or for other people. I think it's really strong of, a character of her to be able to, kind of select her friends and like be strong in that sense, even though it happened some time ago. And so for me, also like, I feel like I'm a little bit strong, being able to talk about like my dad now, when for like a year, I really couldn't talk, without like having to hold back those tears. And, I think it's really empowering, when you're older, when you're maybe put on this platform, for like teenagers and college students to be able to talk about it. Because not only are you kind of like shedding some light onto, the story, but you're also kind of helping yourself kind of close out, find this closure, find this strength, And I know, once we sign off, like, I'm going to feel a lot stronger about this topic. And, even, you know, me talking about this situation with my friend, I feel like if she came to see this, she would feel like she's a little bit stronger. And, because she was able to trust me, sharing this story and knowing that people will probably resonate with this, especially those people who are in high school and probably in that same situation, to know how, you don't have to close out that strength and, like, before you graduate high school. It can be when you're in college. It could be when you're like 30 years old, when you might already have kids, to like revisit these things and find that strength, that confidence to maybe like go out and like find some new friends, and like being now having this ability to, share it with younger people, and like, this is how, a good friend might treat you, or this is how a bad friend might treat you. And I learned it, because now I'm strong, and it kind of like gives some reasoning to how I see, like, my mentors, or like yourself, how like I feel like you talk about these things and like you sound like you've got it in life, and like you understand the mental health, because you're a doctor. But I know now that you have felt those ways, or I could probably assume that you felt some of those ways, and you found that strength, maybe not immediately at the time, but you've grown to that strength, and your strength is like overflowing, and you're able to share that with me. So thank you, Dr. Pyre.
Thank you, Luis. I know I'm going to walk away from our conversation today feeling a renewed strength. And that's a gift that you've given me in this conversation. And I think all of us are going from strength to strength. But there has been something about this conversation that has been strengthening for me as well. I mean, that's not the purpose of it, but that's an ironic side effect. And I just appreciate you talking about that theme of strength, because the psychology world and the therapy world is very, I'm just going to say, very female like dominated. And nothing against females, as I myself am a female, but I think, we talk a lot in this world of therapy about support, and we talk about presence, and we talk about validation, and we talk about emotions. I very rarely hear people talking about strength. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, you coming to the table and being willing to have this conversation with me feels like a missing piece. Like, it feels like we need to talk about strength more often. And it feels like we need to say, like, hey, being able to share with a friend is a strength, and being able to be there for your friend is a way of being strong. And it's never too late to be strong. So thank you for sharing that perspective with us. And I always have a final question that I end with, Luis, but before I ask you my final question, is there anything else that you want to say before we end?
Yeah, real quick. You just reminded me, because you said, I was talking about how my friend was strong, thereafter, like a situation. And you mentioned, how you could be strong for a friend, and how I was strong, like listening to my friend, when she might have felt maybe a little bit vulnerable sharing that story. And so I think something like I want to encourage myself and others is, like, when you don't feel like strong, you can like accept like a little bit of vulnerability, which is strength. And like, people can, people who you choose to be in your close circle to, tackle on a situation, can kind of like, share some of their strength. I've often felt that, like, especially with my friends, my close friends, and my close family, especially like, shout out to my mom. Like, when I feel like I don't have the ability to be weak, and like, it's like, right, I don't have the ability to be strong, but it's like right there, like, I just need an extra step. I feel like people are so willing to share, when they're truly authentic friends and family, to share their strength. And I think that's strong of them, and it's strong of you to be able to ask for some of that. And that's something I want to give myself, like a personal challenge to, ask for help and for strength, and I feel like that feels more empowering, instead of like, you're helpless and you want to ask for help. I feel like you can rephrase that, and like you're asking for strength.
You're asking for strength. That's so awesome. I love that. Yeah. And it's almost like we need to share our strength, or sometimes we might need to even borrow strength from people when we're down and we feel weak or we feel low.
Yeah.
We're asking for strength. All right. Well, I'm going to ask my final question, Luis, if that's okay. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. Final question is just, what do you wish you knew when you were younger?
Ooh, I might need to think about that a little bit more. Let's say, what do I wish I knew when I was younger? I wish that, and honestly, it's not even like that far younger, because I feel like mental health is a topic that's like very brand new to me. But I wish when I was younger that I knew that like everyone's story is like so different. Everyone's reactions to like similar experiences are also so different, and that being able to like share these stories, like these experiences that you kind of deal with, can be like a little bit more empowering. And like I feel like it has helped me, like nowadays, like deal with certain situations a little bit more head on, because I know that other people, my friends and family, have like overcome this. And so kind of knowing that, like, when you deal with a hardship or like a situation that might be a little bit more uncomfortable, knowing that, like, every other human has these unique circumstances and like unique set of days that are delivered to them. I think it's something that I wish I learned a little bit earlier, because that would have helped me like communicate these things and know that, like, it's not uncommon to deal with the hardship. Just because, like, you talk to somebody and they have both parents, doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't mean that, like, only bad things are happening to me. And allowing yourself to kind of like grow into that space has helped me kind of like market like the positive things in myself, and like see as to how I see that everybody else is like a pretty, like, they're pretty well off, like in personality wise, and like it doesn't seem like they're affected like by their life changes. Like, I realize that I can do the same thing for myself and be kind of like a confident pillar for other people and for myself, and know that, like, even though like I might be down someday, I can always come back to it. It's like, when I was younger, I feel like it was like the end of the world for like a lot of those things, and now those are like empowering things that I've been able to like borrow strength from. And so again, just to kind of like summarize that, I wish I would have known that everyone deals with different things, with unique circumstances, and how you can kind of like interpret that and like share like the positive, as well as like the ability to be vulnerable and talk about these things with the people that you feel comfortable with. I wish I knew that when I was younger.
I wish that you got to know that when you were younger too, but I'm glad that you know it now and that you're sharing with everyone who will watch this so that they can learn it, perhaps even earlier than you did. So thank you so much, Luis, for being with us here on the channel.
Of course, my pleasure.
I don't know about you, but I do feel stronger after this conversation with Luis, and I hope that you do as well. I'm so grateful to Luis for sharing his story and sharing his perspective with us. And I'm just sitting with the fact that there really is a power in not trying to be like other people and not getting caught up in the comparison so much, but trying to be our unique self and perhaps even the best version of our unique self, not in a weird pressured way, but just in like a, okay, I'm different from other people. I can be uniquely myself. I can relax into that as I live my life. If it's been hard for you to relax because you've been struggling with anxiety, as Luis and I talked about, please remember that we do have a signature anxiety program that can help you. It's designed to help teens and college students move forward with the next steps in their education and in their friendships. It's me teaching you all the tools, skills, and strategies that I've taught young people as a psychologist for the past 20 years or so. It's also designed where there's no appointments, there's no scheduling involved. You don't have to be on a waiting list. You don't have to have awkward conversations with a stranger or Zoom calls or any of that kind of stuff that is so often a barrier for people. You can do this from the comfort of your own home and go at your own pace. So if that's of interest to you, check out the link in the pinned comment below. There's a free introductory training for your parents. Share that with them, watch it yourself, check it out, and I hope to see you there.